Hello, beautiful women and men of God. Welcome back to my channel. This is a channel where I do prophetic words, prophetic dreams, and visions that the Lord has given me. I do words, Bible studies, and just encouragement for the children, the women and men in the body of Christ. It may be confirmation, something that I say or that I preach or that I teach on. So take everything back to the Lord, of course. But today I wanted to do a word about perspective, right? About changing and shifting your perspective on things to have a better out view of what's actually happened or what God is really doing in your life. I was looking at earlier in my notes, and I'm in a youth Bible study group from a guy named Jason on TikTok. And very powerful young man of God, literally been preaching for years, and he's only 22 years old. So he was talking in one of the Bible studies that I was in, and I took down notes, and he has said where you sit determines what you see, and what you see determines what you do. You have to change your perspective. So what he means is where you sit, what you see is happening in your life, it determines what you do. If we look, for example, at John chapter 9, verse 1 through 3. Let's go there. Chapter 9, John 1 through 3. It's the story about the blind boy and how the people thought that the reason for his blindness was sin, right? They thought that, what did his parents do or what did he do that caused him to be blind, that God was punishing him for his sin. Chapter 9, verses 1 through 3, it says, as he was passing by, talking about Jesus, it says, a man blind from birth he saw. His disciples asked him, teacher, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, Jesus answered. This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. So the people around him, they saw the boy, and since they were looking at what they saw, their perspective was what they saw in front of them, they determined that, oh, he must have sinned, right? And what they did was blame his parents or blame the boy and say, what sin did you do that God is punishing you, right? But in reality, from God's perspective, Jesus said this boy or his parents didn't sin. God did this because God knows the beginning from the end. And he knew that this day would come where I would heal this boy and people would see the glory of God. That God can heal the blind people, heal mute people, right? So that the glory of God will be shown and portrayed through this young boy, right? Sometimes sin isn't an effect of not sin, but illnesses and diseases and bad things happening in your life. It's not an effect or what's the word, like a consequence of something that you did or your parents did. Sometimes it's so that the glory of God could be shown, so that God can heal you and you can testify about the healing power of God, so that other people know that God can heal them too, right? Because this life, it's not about us, it's all about the glory of God. So that's what Jesus is telling them. He says, so that God's works might be displayed in him, right? It's nothing that the parents did. So when Jesus's perspective enlightened their perspective, they understood, oh, it's not because of what the parents or the son did, it's because of what God is doing, right? And what God wanted to be shown and displayed using this boy and his life as an example, right? Even if we look at Job, the story of Job, and how Job went literally in chapter 7 from being angry with God. Let's read there actually. Going to Job, he literally went from being angry with God, right, at God. He didn't sin and blame God or curse God or anything like that like his wife did. Job, he was just angry. He was confused. He was hurt, right? He lived a righteous life and he's wondering, God, why is this happening to me? He literally went from that mindset because in a perspective of pain. He's outside of the knowledge and the wisdom and the surety of what God is doing in his life. God knows what God is doing and why what's happening to Job is happening, right? But Job doesn't know. So from his perspective, from the outside looking in, when God is on the inside looking out, from the outside looking in, Job says this in verse 20, chapter 7. He says, "If I have sinned, what have I done to you, watcher of humanity?" Talking about the Lord. Then he says, "Why have you made me your target, so that I have become a burden to you?" Job thinks that the Lord is making him he's a burden in the Lord's sight, and that's why these things are happening. But in reality, from the perspective of God and what's really happening from a high perspective, God is really testing Job's loyalty and Job's faithfulness. Job had lived a solid, loyal, amazing. It says God said he was one of the most upright men on the earth at the time, right? So Job didn't do anything wrong, but God was putting him through a test, right? And Satan, he had allowed to take that hedge of protection from around Job and allow Satan to throw trials and tribulations and death at his family at Job to see if Job would curse God. But Job did not curse God. He passed his test. So you have to change your perspective. And we see Job started out as angry, confused with God. Am I a burden to you? Why is this happening to me? To in chapter 11, he progresses from there, and it goes, even his friends blamed in their perspective from what they saw. The Hebrew people, they believed, like we were talking about with the blind boy, they believed that sin caused distress. Sin caused bad things to happen to you, and God to pour his wrath on you, which is true, but it's not the only cause, right? As we see, sometimes God is testing you. Sometimes God wants to see your loyalty and your faith level. So, but they thought the only way or the only reason something bad was happening in someone's life was because of sin. So his friends even had turned and started blaming him and started calling him wicked. In verse 11, 1 through 20, Zophar calls him wicked and says he deserves worse for his wickedness and that he will suffer, that wicked people like him deserve to suffer. And the whole time, he wasn't even wicked. Job had never did anything wrong, but Zophar, his perspective, he's seeing the inflictions, the pain, the disasters that's befall upon Job, and he's judging from what he sees. And that caused him to act and curse his friend and to belittle his friend and to blame his friend and to turn on his friend, right? So we see how our perspective causes us to act, right? Whether unrighteously or righteously. And we see as the story goes on with Job, in verse 37, we see God's perspective, right? So we see man's perspective. They're looking from the outside in, but like I said, God sees from the inside out. He's in the midst of it, and he sees the bigger picture. He's God, right? So we see in chapter 38, verses 1 through 7, it says, "Then the Lord answered Job from the whirlwind, and he said, 'Who is this who obscures my counsel with ignorant words? Get ready to answer me like a man. When I question you, you will inform me. Where were you when I established the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who fixed its dimensions? Certainly you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? What supports its foundations, or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy." So God is like, where were you when I did all these things, right? Since you're questioning me, since your perspective is so much wiser and grander and you know everything, you know why what's happening to you and what's causing it, where were you at when I laid out the foundations of the earth? Where were you at when I had created dimensions, right? Where were you at when I laid the cornerstones of the earth, right? So God is bestowing and he's showing them his perspective and his mighty, omnipresent power and glory, and that he knows everything, The Lord is literally omnipotent. He's all powerful. He's sovereign. He's showing he's omniscient. Y'all know the word I'm talking about. But he's everywhere. He knows all things. There's nothing he's not in control of. If something's happening to you, it's because the Lord's allowing it. The Lord's trying to either, it's a lot to that, but he could be trying to teach you something, right? He could be testing you. He could be trying to bring something out of you, right? Trying you in the fire so that you can be refined, come out refined, right? So there are so many different things God can be doing in the midst of your refining, of you going through something. It doesn't always equal whatever your perspective is. That's not the answer. You have to look at it from God's perspective. And when you look at it from the Lord's perspective, it changes how you respond, right? So due to God showing Job his perspective, God's like, where were you when this happened? And this is opening Job's eyes. Like, whoa, where, God is holy. He's so much bigger. He's in charge of this situation, right? What am I doing, right? Why am I doubting God, right? The God of the universe. So that causes him to react. In chapter 42. In chapter 42, verses 1 through 6, let's read. It says, then Job replied to the Lord, I know that you can do anything, and no plan of yours can be thwarted. You asked, who is this who conceals my counsel with ignorance? Surely I spoke about things I did not understand. So Job says in the beginning, when he was confused at God and he was angry at God and he was kind of like, God, you're being injustice. You're serving me injustice. I did nothing wrong. I'm innocent, right? He's saying I spoke ignorantly, right? The whole line about God gives and God takes away. He says, I spoke ignorantly when I said that. My eyes are now opened, right? You are in charge of all things and everything. And then he says, surely I spoke about things I did not understand, things too wondrous for me to know. You said, listen now, and I will speak. When I question you, you will inform me. I had heard reports about you, but now my eyes have seen you. That happens in the midst of the furnace, in the midst of the fire, in the midst of trials and tribulation. We are able to now see God. It opens up a new dimension of who he is and what he's trying to teach us. And this is what happened to Job. He reached a new dimension of understanding and wisdom in God at the end of all of everything that happened to him. And it says, therefore, I reject my words and I am sorry for them. He repents. And it says, I am sorry for them. I am dust and ashes. He's come to the realization that he is nothing. That he's literally dust and ashes. We are dust and ashes. Anything that we're going through, anything that we're complaining about, and some people, they tend to point it to God and they blame God. Oh, you did this. You don't know what you're doing. Thinking God don't know what he's doing. God knows what he's doing. He's God, right? Like he said, where were you at when he laid the foundations of the earth, when he created the wind, waves, the fire, the water, the animals? Oh, there's so much, Job. I love reading Job. But God is omnipresent. When he created the lightning, and it says, one of the things I love, he said, God, he was like, let me see. Do you know when mountain goats give birth? Have you watched the deer in labor? Can you count the months they are pregnant? How can you know the time they give birth? All these things God knows. And he says, yeah, you want to doubt me, right? Who gives strength to horses? Who's put wisdom in the heart of man? Who's pumping your lungs right now? Why are you walking and breathing and having your being? It's because the Lord is in control of it. The Lord can stop your breath, can take your life away in one split second, yet we choose to doubt him each and every day. Oh God, how is this going to happen? Why is this happening to me? The Lord's like, chill. We have to chill. We have to trust in the Lord. Faith without, what does it say? It's impossible to please God without faith. It's impossible. So when you have no faith in God, when you're constantly doubting God, it's like you're worshiping the devil, right? It's like you're in opposite wills with the God, with the Lord and what he wants to do, because you're pushing him away. You're doubting him. You're not believing and fully trusting in his promises or what he's doing in your life. So the minute you put down your faith, your trust, it becomes unpleasing in the sight of the Lord. And the minute you pick up wisdom and you pick up trust and faith in the Lord and understand that you are literally nothing, it's all about him, it's all about his glory, and that you submit and you succumb to his will and what's happening to your life, and you just continue to seek his face and give him praise and give him glory, that's when you'll see a breakthrough. That's when you'll see and you'll learn and you'll gain the wisdom and the knowledge and the you'll be refined like the Father wants you to be refined, and you'll come out even better, right? And you'll be created and molded into who he wants you to, right? Because you've gone through the fire and you've trusted him through it. Just like the 3 Hebrew boys, they had went through the fire. They trusted the Lord through it all. And it says that Jesus showed up in the fire with them, and they came out the fire unharmed. So, you know, you guys, I encourage you to trust the Lord in the midst of your fire. Change your perspective. Ask the Lord if you don't know what the Lord's perspective is. Meditate and pray on it, and seek the Lord and say, God, what's your perspective? Help me to understand. Give me the wisdom, the knowledge, the insight. Speak to me, Lord, and show me your perspective so that I can react in a way and walk and act accordingly, right? Properly, according to your perspective, not mine. Love you all. Be blessed. Have a great night or day, whatever time it is, wherever you're at. Hope this helped you. Bye.